I understood you met Peter in the 60s. Like
Yes.
64, 5. And how did you meet?
Well, I met him because he was moving into a loft with William T. Williams. He just left school. I thought he graduated. He said he didn't graduate. He left. He got tired. But that's when I met him. And a couple years later, I met him again at Ed Clark's studio. And then we started being really good friends because he was irreverent. He was, later for the system, I'm gonna paint what I wanna paint. And I felt the same way. So we had a kinship there, and Al Loving was part of that group. Me, Peter, Al, Danny LaRue Johnson, we just got together to just kick it. Mainly, we just were hanging out. We weren't talking so much about painting every once in a while, but usually it was a very small group of abstract artists at that time. In the 60s, nobody wanted to see what we were doing. They were interested in realistic pictures of black people. White people were doing them, and now you got black people doing them. But it was just a different feeling. I was interested in using paint in a different way. I wanted to make paint the subject, and so did Peter. He was using a lot of water. I was using combs. I made combs out of sticks, and I started combing paint in 68, 69. And I had rented Jack Whitten's studio, and when he came back, he said, "Man, what are you doing? You got shit all over my studio." I said, "I can't tell you, man." So the next day he came down to my house, he knocked on the door. He said, he went back to the studio, and I went down, knocked on his door the next day. He said, "I'm not doing what you're doing." I said, "What are all those combs done?" He said, "Well, I'm raking." I said, "Okay." But I think that we were all trading back stuff, I think that, how do I put this? We were friends, and we were a small group, and we hung out together because there was nobody else that we could hang out with that would understand what we were talking about and what we were doing. They would come in, there were people on the edges who would come and hang out with us, certain, dealers who were interested in the work, but they weren't going to show it. They thought it was very interesting. Oh, it looks like Pollock, or looks like... We were always compared to somebody else other than the work itself. So I told Pete, all we got to do is just keep working, man, just doing what we do, whether we get it in this life or the next. The idea is to do the work. That's the bottom line, Maybe in another lifetime it comes back around, or maybe not at all. That's not the point. The point is that if you are imbued with the spirit to make images or to paint or do whatever, that's what you do. If you're a dancer, you're a singer, whatever your art form is. If you're a dealer, there are great dealers who are very creative in the way they deal with the work. But I think it's all about, comes from the heart. That's what I talk about most of the time. With my students, I say, you take pictures with your heart and not with your eyes. It's the same thing with painting. This is all about feeling. All these paintings are about feeling. They're not about the history of art. They're not about what Da Vinci did or any other schools of art. This is coming directly from his emotional state and feeling, which I think most art comes from that level. But he added extra little touch of his own on it, which nobody else was doing at that time.
Yourself, you are a very important photographer. So you have been shooting film stills very early on at very important Hollywood studio sets. Could you tell us a little bit about your own work?
Well, I got involved in doing stills on movies in '69, I guess. I got voted into the union. The first film I worked on was Nothing But a Man with Ivan Dixon and Abby Lincoln. And I worked in the room syncing up dailies. I had never thought that there was even a job like that. But then Ozzie Davis was doing a movie. Okay, the whole story. Somebody called me one day and said they're looking for a really good photographer to work on a movie. I said, well, who are the people? They said, well, it's United Artists and Sidney Poitier is going to direct this movie. And I think you should go take your portfolio over there. So I did. I went over and I met him and I met his producer, and he looked at my work, he looked at the book. He said, nice, work. He's very quiet. And he got to a picture of Diana Carroll looking very sexy. And he closed the book and walked out the room. I never saw him again. But his producer came in and said, well, I think he still has some feeling toward her because they were supposed to get married when they were shooting this film, Paris Blues. They had been engaged. And I guess it didn't happen. So I guess he had something, but he didn't come back. So Joel came in and told me that they were doing this movie, Cotton Comes to Harlem, with Ozzie Davis directing. And Ozzie Davis had required that he wanted some black people behind the camera. So Joel said, go see this guy and tell him. I said, yeah, right, I heard that before. He said, no, seriously. I said, yeah, right. He said, wait a minute. So he called the guy on the phone right there. He said, I got a guy here, I want you to see his work. He's coming over right now. So I went over and he looked at the work. He got to about 10 photos. He said, this is great. He said, this is just what we need, this type of work, very intimate but removed. So he gave me, I said, what's the job? I didn't even know what it was. He said, well, you take pictures on the set when they're doing the movie, and we use them for advertising and publicity. I said, oh, piece of cake. So I worked on the first movie, and I was already traveling all over the world. I had an agent, and I was doing stuff for magazines, and I'd been to Paris and London and Rome, and it was a big deal working on the movie. I didn't care that much about it. And I didn't like the fact you had to work, for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, 8 weeks, man. No, man. Work 2 or 3 days, get a bunch of money, you send in the pictures, they send you a check. That was my style. We're gonna move one city, one country to the other. So this idea of working 8 to 10 weeks with the same group of people was really difficult for me at first. But then I began to understand how they were using the work. And then I began to, shoot the kind of things that I felt. And I found that they liked what I did. They didn't give me any direction and say, well, they would say things like, we want to use something here for this or for that. Could you get a close-up of or this or that or whatever? But they never ever told me what to shoot because they liked the style that I was working in. So in 1969, I got voted into the union. And I got in by 1 vote.
Which was a big deal.
It was a very big deal. There were no African-American still photographers at that time that worked in the movie industry. So the guy that broke the tie, he called me. He said he was a cameraman. He wasn't even a photographer. He was, a cinematographer. He said, Adger, he said, I saw your work. He said, and he said, it came to a tie. He said, and I broke the tie. He said, because I think you should be in this union because your credit to, he said, not because of your color, but because of your work. So then I worked on a lot of movies after that.
But before that, you have also been a founding member?
Well, we started a group called the Kamonge Photographers when I got out of school in 1958.
Wow.
And I came to New York and I started working with Gordon Parks at Life magazine. He said, well, you know how to develop film and load hold? I said, yeah. He said, well, what did you study in school? I said, photography. He said, what do you mean? I said, I studied photography for 4 years. I studied commercial photography, printing, I know how to develop color, all this stuff. And at that time in the 50s, if you wanted to be a photographer, you had to work with a photographer. And then you would learn techniques and stuff, and then he might give you some of his clients. But that's the way you learn to be a photographer back then. There were no schools of photography. I mean, they had schools 1 year, 2 years, but they didn't give degrees. And Ohio University was the first school that gave a degree. There was a college, which I won't mention out west, but they didn't admit black people at that time. They said in there, we do not admit Negroes. But they were the only school that gave a full degree. So it was 4 years that I studied photography there. So we learned everything. And my teacher, Clarence H. White Jr., was Clarence H. White Sr.'s son. Clarence H. White Sr. had been one of the members in Stieglitz's gallery. So Stieglitz was considered the father of American photography. So I learned photography as an art. You know, that was my sort of upbringing. We got to see Ansel Adams' prints, and we got to see Weston's prints, and a lot of different other people, because he had this collection, his father's collection, so we got to see actual prints. Mm-hmm. And I think the first prints that really blew me away were Edward Weston's prints. The quality was like 3D. I had never seen a photograph like that. You know, you see the newspaper and this, and you know, those are not photographs, those are just pictures. So to look at an actual print that Ansel Adams made or Weston made was a real revelatory situation. You know, they'd say, well, how did he do that? You know, what kind of developer, you know, exposing the native. There were so many things about photography at that time that just blew me away, and I was captivated. I mean, I started life as a musician. I started playing trumpet when I was a kid, and I played all the way through school. I had a little band and everything. So music I thought was going to be my sort of life's work, but after photography, and there was something about it. I think the magic for me was being in the dark room. You know, you shoot a picture, and then you go in the dark room, and that's where the magic is. You know, you develop the negative. You know, in those days you had to do it like this. They didn't have the tanks. And they had to turn on the green light and look and say, a little bit overexposed, and then you put it in the stop bath, and then the hypo, and then you go and you make a print. And when that print starts to come up, all of the magic that you felt when you were taking the picture sort of comes back, and you realize, oh yeah, let me tone that down a little bit. Then you start making a print based on the feeling that you had when you shot it.
You described your photographies with the word intimacy, which you actually also see in the photographs, the beautiful one of Peter you took, and some of them we reproduced. Portrait was always very important for
people.
You?
People, whether they were portraits of an individuals or just pictures on the street. The idea of capturing the feeling of something that's going on, so when somebody else looks at it, they say yes, or they say, you know, what is it? But it's the matter of that feeling that you have. You know, you press the shutter, when you see something happen, you press the shutter. And what makes you press the shutter? Not your eyes only see. It's the heart that feels, and you press the button when you feel it from here, you see. And that's the magic to when you go and make the print, is that feeling there.
There are those photographs with the dog, Peter with the dog. Can you remember?
Oh, yeah.
The scene? Can you tell us a little bit?
Yeah.
It looks so, they're fascinating.
Yeah, well, Peter was easy in the sense that he didn't care what I was doing. He wasn't posing for me. I only did one portrait of him in my studio, an 8x10 portrait that I liked. But all the rest, Peter was like, he wasn't trying to, you know, say, oh, get a picture made like this. He was just doing what he was doing. And I was hanging out with him, you know, mostly talking about painting. You know.
Did you discuss about art a lot?
Oh yeah, we talked about photography. You know, he was like, photography. You know, back in those days, photography is not art. You know, anybody can do that. You know, but then as time went on, you know, and he began to see, because I had other work that I was doing. When I first started photographing water and layers and images in water, it really interested him. He said, well, that's not a person. I said, well, but what's in there? He said, I feel something. I said, yeah, there is an emotion involved with the person that's photographing, you know, the water. I mean, you know, I sat by the water for days and just looked without taking pictures. And I don't know if you read Siddhartha by Herman Hesse. There's a scene where he talks about sitting by the water and seeing his life. That kind of happened to me. I began to, my energy and my feeling connected with the water, and I began to see all kinds of things. It was very fast. At first, I didn't think I could do it because everything was moving so fast, and it wasn't like, you know, oh, you click. It was like it became an emotional connection between the water and me. It was very emotional. And I began to see and feel things that I'd never seen before, almost like dream-like, in the sense that, you know, you have dreams and you have these images that are real clear sometimes, but then you wake up and they're gone. Well, water was like that. I'm still fascinated by water surfaces and layers because there are images in there that are related to, I think, everything that's human and everything that's organic. But, you know, most people say, oh, a picture of water. Well, look at it. You know, it's like you look at Peter's paintings, oh, yeah, it's abstract. But if you sit with it for a while, it begins to say something to you. And the water photographs were like that for me. I think the first show I had them, they were 40 by 60 inches. And people would come in and look, you know, but the Asian people, the Chinese and the Japanese and Filipino, they would come in and they would sit down and look at them. The Americans, they would go, oh, water. But, you know, some people would come in and they would say, well, what is it? And I would say, just sit there and let it talk to you. If you go today in the woods and you just sit and look at the surface of water and watch it change, there's something that will happen to you. There's a spiritual connection.
But then there is a parallel between the surfaces of Peter's work and your photographies.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Because you also have to sit in the painting of Peter and it grows. And what's especially fascinating is the layers he creates, and it takes time to really see them, understand them, and it always changes.
Right.
Also,
well, he works with water. You know, he wets his whole canvases before he puts anything on them.
And it's interesting.
So it soaks in, so it spreads. And when it dries, you have these different levels.
And it's interesting, Clemence just said before, the paintings look so different here to Los Angeles. And I mean, of course, different light, different situations.
Well, there's more daylight there, and you could see,
but it just shows how that your perception also changes. Like looking at water. The work behind us is called ruling light. And, I mean, light is, let's say, the reason why you can make photography, the reason why we see, the reason for our communication. How would Peter, you said he was a little skeptical at the beginning about photography, but then understood.
Yeah, well, when he saw the water photographs, then he, you know, and he bothered me about it for a long time, and discussing, you know. And he came to the opening show, which was at Green Street at that time. Tony Goldman, we were artists in resident there. And Tony Goldman opened this gallery called Green Street. So when he came to the show, he said, hey man, he said, I want that. I said, you can't have that. Just I said, you give me a painting, I'll do it. We can, you know. He said, well, I don't know. I said, you didn't put me in the other show. You had the big show there, you know, the gallery. You had everybody. You didn't have one photographer. You had all the sculptures. I said, you didn't have one photographer in the show, man. He looking at my work and talking about it. I said, he said, well, man, you know, photography, he said, but wasn't an art then? I said, it was always an art. But I think it was the times everybody felt that photography was not an art because you can make a reproduction of the same image, not realizing that every picture that you made would be different when you're in the darkroom. You don't ever make the same print. Now you can because of digital. But I think in those days, each print that you made, if you look at Ansel Adams' prints like, let's say, Moonrise over Hernandez, there's several different styles. It's the same image, but he's printed it differently, each one, because of the feeling, you know. And there's just so many levels of light in black and white photography, I think more than in color, that can distinguish, you know, minute details. You know, it's just flawless in that way, you know. And I think in painting with Peter, by letting the color spread, you know, by flinging it on and saying, let me see what happens, and then adding water or letting it stay out, different things happen. You don't have a sense that he took a brush and painted this.
It's, I like the term, when I think about his work, of what Clement Greenberg used, permanent surprise. Not just in what's happening on the surface, but also how you perceive it. When you were very close in the 70s, so I mean, Peter was very busy at that time. He was working at Pearl's Gallery. He had numerous shows at Andre Emmerich Gallery, which was a great gallery for abstract painters. How do you remember that time? So,
well, Peter got lucky in that, you know, he got hired because he knew and understood painting. I think there were no other African American artists, I don't like that word, there were black painters or black dealers, you know, at that time. But because of his knowledge and what he knew, then, you know, he got involved in it. He was the only person doing that at the time. Some guys were really angry about him. Well, how'd you get, you must kiss some ass to get there. You know, we're out here struggling, you got this great job, you know. But Peter wasn't showing his paintings. He was selling paintings. But he understood the market, he understood what he was looking at. He had a real keen knowledge of painting and the history of it. So, and that's what it was about. It was about his knowledge, not that he was black.
Did he ever talk to you about the use of the spray gun?
Spray gun?
Yeah.
Oh, he had more than spray gun. He had all kind of shit. We all did. We all did. I had machines, I had combs, I had a spray, I had all kind of splatter shit. We were all doing, you know. That whole school, I still think, has to be defined a little more. Well, you know, they start with up here. I mean, Sam Gilliam got a lot of stuff from that whole school, you know. So did Gerard Richter. You know, talk about Gerard Richter. He's considered but Gerard Richter was in New York and going to studios and looking at people. I saw him, I met him. So I know he was smelling around to see what's going on in New York. You know, they all were. They all came to New York because that's where it was happening. It wasn't happening in France. It wasn't happening. It was happening right here in New York, in Soho, and all that whole area was just filled with artist loves who were doing all kinds of stuff that were different.
How was Peter's relation to Sam Gilliam?
I don't know. I don't think he had a relationship with Sam Gilliam like that.
I mean there was some relationship.
He knew his work, but I don't think he had to my knowledge, he didn't have a friendship.
I don't think a friendship, but what's kind of reported is that Sam Gilliam, when he did the deluxe show, came and they were hanging together some of the works, and so there must have been some relation, but perhaps not.
Well, he respected his work.
Yeah.
You know, he wanted to hang what he felt were the heavy guys on the art scene at that time, black and white. So that was the reason. It wasn't because he had a great relationship with Sam Gilliam.
And William?
I mean, he knew Danny, but a lot of times he and Danny, we argued. We had, you know, we had names for everybody. Everybody had a name. And Danny was called Edge, you know. William T. Williams was called Crackle. We had all these names for styles that different artists did. But this was personal. This was just our own personal kind of thing.
But would you say that Peter was more by himself in a way, or was he very close to William T. Williams?
Well, he and William T. Williams were close at one point, but they're two different styles, two different concepts. I know that William T. Williams respected Peter's work, and Peter respected William T.'s work. They were in shows together, along with what's the English guy? Not English. He was knighted. Frank Bollings.
Oh, Frank.
Frank was on the scene. Frank. They talk about Frank in the books about England. And he went to New York and showed the guy. He didn't show nothing. That's bullshit. He learned everything about all his techniques and stuff in New York City in his studio in Brooklyn. I was over there. I photographed him, you know, and I photographed him in England. So, and I saw what he was doing there, and I saw, you know, not to take anything with him, Frank's a great painter, but he got all of his, what I call, comeuppance in New York. The New York scene was hot, and it was a lot underground because they weren't showing our work, you know. But we knew what was happening. So, you know, Al Loving came here. He was the first African-American or black person to have a show at the Whitney. Nobody knew him on the scene here because he came from Detroit. And so everybody said, who's this guy, man? This black guy, he's had a show at the Whitney. You know him? I said, no, man, I never seen this guy before. So let's go to the show. We weren't invited, of course, we crashed the show and met Al. He was there. He said, hey, man, you know, how you guys doing? He said, you guys are artists, right? I said, yeah, man. He said, when the show, he said, come on, man. The show was over. He said, come on. We took him to Chinatown, got him drunk as hell. And stayed up all night talking about how it was that he got this show when all these New York paintings, nothing happened. You know, how did that work? Well, he'd been to school and educated, but it was luck. It was just luck that he got this show, one-man show at the Whitney, a big show too. The only other person that had anything like that was, well, Bearden never had anything like that. Neither did Jacob Lawrence, I think, was the first one that had a show like that with his series from the South, which is very realistic stuff. But abstract work, like what Al was doing, nobody was showing that.
Frank Bowling.
Frank didn't have a show at the Whitney either. None of these guys on the scene did. You know, but I think that after Al did that, then they started looking around. But you know, it's like they skip every 10 years. You know, all the artists from my time got skipped over because all the curators now are younger. They went to Yale, they went to Harvard. People who came before, they didn't go there. You see, these guys were just from the street or whatever. So, you know, Al Loving and Peter and Jack Wood and all these guys got skipped over. Some of them got taken in, but they were already old. And Ed Clark had a show at Hauser and Ritt, and the day they had the first big show for him, he died 2 days before the show. I mean, to me, that's sad, you know. And now they're talking about his work, but where did he didn't get it while he was alive, you know?
That's very true.
Because now all the artists are 30 or 40, or you know, they're not talking about people 80 years old. They're skipped over a whole generation because what shall I say, the groundwork wasn't there, you know, to be supported. Like now it is, because they realize that these collections need work from, you know, other people, you know.
But when you look at the works of Peter today, they are radical, they are extremely free, and the way he treats the surface, the way, the freedom of he takes to work about color, it's all about color, is revolutionary. So it's a new way to look at it.
Revolutionary. It's intuitive. I'll put it that way. It's a very intuitive. And it's an intuitive way from his point of view.
Of course.
You know. But revolutionary, people have been painting forever.
And they will keep on.
And they'll keep on painting.
They'll keep on.
But I think Peter's niche is his freedom and his sense of color and his way that he put it down, you know, wet.
What do you think about his development when you think the 70s and then you see a clear, I mean, I understand it that he got even freer in the works like to follow, especially the works he did in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, of course he got freer. Look, I think as you get older as an artist, first you come and say, oh, you want to sell work, you want to do some painting, and you make this painting and take it around. And after about 50 or 60, you don't give a fuck. You know, you're going to paint what you want to paint, and you don't give a shit what the critics say. Because the critics only relate your work to some historical point. They don't start with your work, you see. And after a while, you begin to realize it. What are they talking about? They're talking about, you know, something else. You have to do the work. And when you do the work, then they can come to it and they can say, okay, this is something different, or this is this and that, you know. And I think that Peter got to that point, you know, especially after he moved up to the country. I go visit him, you know, on the weekends, and he'd be sitting there cussing and talking and playing jazz. And what do you think about that color? You know, like that. And it was just like that.
But that's a good keyword, because we spoke a little bit about light, we spoke about surface, water, surface, what surface means in general. Music, you said actually your first idea as a kid was becoming a musician. And Peter said that every color is music, a special tone in music to him.
Well, Kandinsky said that.
Of course.
You
but
know,
he
assigned a color to every note.
And so you meet also in music, you could say. Is there something you can give us more insight?
Well, with music you have rhythm, you have timing, you have color, you have all these things in music. When you translate them to painting, you're using the feeling. If you're writing music and you're using notes, you know, da 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 da, but if you're painting, you know, it's a feeling more so than actually notation, you know. And Peter just got to the place where, I mean, he just realized that painting is about the color. That's the first thing that you identify with. You identify with the color, whether it's a bird in a tree or an apple on a table, you know. First thing, you look at the color. And either it grabs you or it doesn't, you know. And I think that that's kind of where all this old school of guys, that's where we're coming from. Peter, Danny, everybody. We're all coming from that point that color is the subject. And that's what it's about, you know, and that's what you, this lady's sitting over here, she got orange on, she got a striped scarf on. Now, when she got up this morning, she had to make a decision if she was gonna wear that. Everybody here made a decision about whatever they were gonna put on. He's got this beautiful tie, look at it. He thought about that. He didn't just go in and say, oh, I'm putting anything on. He went to we are always making these decisions every day using color, without even thinking about it. If a woman walks in with a red dress on, she got a beautiful body, where you go, everybody looks. The women look. Why? Because there's a vibration going on there, and it's in a beautiful form. That's what painting is. Painting is a vibration in a beautiful form.
And thinking of Peter, he never used a brush, so he did everything.
I used the brush.
Tell us more.
Use the brush like that. Well, you know, you go, whoosh. I mean, Ed Clark used push brooms totally in his work. That's all he used was push brooms. You know?
The broom, yes. Is kind of a brush.
Yeah. And Peter used push broom too, and he used other things too, but he wet the canvas. That's what was, you want to say, revolutionary. I think Peter, in his heart of hearts, if those canvases could stay wet, that is really what he wants. That's what he really wants. If these canvases were wet and would stay wet, he would be happy. That's what he was really after. When they dry, they change. But I think he liked that wet surface, that, you know, when that color mixed together. I mean, I understand it too, you know. I think everybody does when you see it. There's a livingness of wet color as opposed to dried color.
Yeah, which then brings it back to water.
Back to water, yeah.
And the effects of water.
Yeah. How many of you seen the film? 1, 2, 3. You guys have to see the film, you know, on Peter. It's a great film. It's a great film. He really talks, you can really understand Peter once you see this film of where he's really coming from. Because he tells you right there what it is and how he got there, you know. But I think that I'm glad it's a nice big book.
It turned out, I think, very well. Shall we take some questions?
Sure. Yes.
Came a little late to your talk, but your photography, are you like a fine art photographer? Did you get to start working for magazines? Like, are you a photojournalist also?
I did everything. I did photographs for Look magazine, a couple things for Live Post magazines. They may not be there now. I did some stuff for the New York Times, all the Ebony, travel stuff, commercial stuff. I got tired of the commercial work. I just got away from it. I didn't want to do that anymore. And that was 69, 68, 60. I went to Brazil. So I'm through. I went to Brazil. I'm glad I did. Because, you know, the commercial work, you know, it's interesting. You can make a living, you know. Say, well, we can give this drawing of this toothpaste and it's this high and it's got to be 3/4 of an inch and it's got to lay. I mean, really, come on. Illustration, that's different. If you're illustrating them, that's another whole art form. But, you know, in those days, if they wanted to commercialize a liquor or something, they would tell you what size it had to be on the page, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, Bert Stern kind of revolutionized that liquor ad commercial when he went and did things at the Pyramid, and he did different things to promote Smirnoff liquor. It was one of them. Anyway, that changed it. Avedon changed some things in what he did, you know, and people started, you know, emulating or doing things. But at that time, these guys were not considered artists. They were commercial photographers. But after photography became an art, and photography became an art, when Ansel Adams was on the cover of Time magazine in 1979, that's when photography became an art. Because somebody paid $1,500 for Moonrise over Hernandez, and they went crazy. Oh, that's ridiculous. Photograph, oh my God. And then they started writing about how terrific it was in photography. And then all these guys became artists, the commercial photographers. Their work started, you know, Bert Stern, all of them, and all the guys you can name, you know. And then they started doing very creative things with still life, and you know, I don't know. The whole thing changed. Now it's another ball game. Nobody cares anymore about photography because you have digital. You can take somebody else's work and change it and make it yours. So the idea of shooting a picture of something and making a print is sort of kind of dead art to a certain extent. Some people still collect and understand the importance of, a print like a platinum print or a silver gelatin print. But nowadays, the people, anything that's, people say, wow.
But Adger, then they lose this moment you described to recover actually that moment you took the photo, mm-hmm. and when you develop, mm-hmm. and the image appears, mm-hmm. which is again, by the way, like water. Mm-hmm. So it's again mm-hmm. your perception mm-hmm. of what's happening there mm-hmm. is like a film. It's like
that's right. It's energy going back and forth.
A duration, la durée, mm-hmm. in that mm-hmm. sense. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very hard to compare the digital mm-hmm. photography to the analog photography.
Well, you don't compare it. It's just digitography. That's what I call it. It's digitography. It's not photography. It's digitography. It's different. There's photography and there's digitography.
But I thought it was really very interesting, this whole complex of the moment. But
very important, the moment.
Yeah, the moment.
That moment, yeah. But digital photography, you can take a picture and say, oh, I like that, and then you change it a little bit here, and then dot over there, and you go over here and say, oh, the background's too dark, too light. You do all these changes electronically. Photography is light on the surface. Mm-hmm. It's a thin layer of emotion on paper. That's another ball game.
And the digital is a code of green, red, and blue, is it? Mm-hmm. No, green, red, yellow. Mm-hmm. But colors. It's a code. Mm-hmm. So right. That's of course a big.
I mean, I'm not against it. I do digital photography. There's a lot of things you can do you couldn't do before, but I still think that there's a place when you understand what a real photograph is. There's a place, there's a feeling about it when you can really get into, emotions and different papers and platinum prints and all this. It's a different thing.
But do you still develop your own?
Yeah, I still do all of it. Yeah.
So you still have a lab?
I'm an image maker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a dark room.
No, I've met a couple of photographers still really working in the lab and loving it.
It's you. Once you get bit, I say, you love it. Once you understand the complicated thing of getting this and this together and to get a shot on a gelatin surface and then to take that in the darkroom and then come off with something. That's the art of it. You gotta don't just it doesn't come out of thin air. Like any art, you're gonna be a sculptor. You gotta learn. You're gonna work in stone. You gotta learn stone tools, density of rocks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a learning curve to photography, just like there's a learning curve to digitography. There's a learning curve, but I think the younger artists today are all caught up with this digital thing. They don't understand that there's still the learning curve. And once you learn that, then your digitography, I think, will be better. You'll understand more about what it is you're doing when you're pressing those buttons. You won't just press, oh, it's purple. That's nice. I haven't seen that before. It's purple. Oh, he's great. It's his pictures in purple. Isn't that great? Bullshit. But, I'm an old guy. But I think it's going to change again. It's going to change again. Digitography is going to die out, and something else is going to happen. It's not going to die, it's going to change. The idea of a photograph or the idea of image, and making any kind of image on any kind of surface is going to change.
But you can compare digital sound, so everything
Digital
digitalized,
sounds. Don't
and
start me with digital
record sound.
Don't start me with
But
digital sound.
what came back? The record came back. It's
Yeah.
one of the most booming part of the music business.
Yeah,
So
I know. I mean, digital sound is like, it's incredible. But you can also amplify those natural qualities too, that are different. You know, when you involve your physical feeling and your heart in anything, it comes back. You know.
Do you ever speak with Peter about the digital sound or digital image? Is that something that interests
No,
him?
I never talked with him.
Or-
He's a jazz man, and you know, he doesn't like all that crazy sound stuff. He likes jazz music because it's the most creative. You have these men and women who are creating on the moment. You know, they're playing My Blue Haze or any song. They might play it through. Everybody plays it. Da 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 da. Everybody plays it. Da 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 da. And then they say, okay, you go to the chorus. Da 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 da. Everybody plays it different. You can play Summertime 1,000 times. Everybody here, if you were a musician and you played Summertime, every one of you would play it differently. Every time you played it, not just once. Every time you play it different. Maybe the night before you had some problems, you had a dream, or you had a fight with your old lady or your old man, and you felt a certain kind of way. Well, you would play music. That's what musicians do. They play different every day because they got feelings. You feel different on every day.
But then that connects photography, painting,
Photography,
music.
painting. It's all art. If it's done to that level, I don't care what it is. You're a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, don't matter. If you put your heart and soul into it and stay with it, you will find what the art of it is. And to me, the art of all of it is being able to speak as a human being. We are all human beings. And somehow we seem to forget that when wars happen and people start killing each other for money. We seem to forget that every human being has a heart, you know, and we all bleed blood, and we all come in here to die. Nobody get it. You don't get out of here without dying. If we could just remember that we're all human beings, it would be changed overnight, you know. And nobody made anything. You didn't make nothing. What have you made? You haven't made anything on this earth. What have you made? Somebody made you. What have you made? What have you added to the planet? Have you added something? No, I didn't smoke cigarettes, drink liquor, no, carry on, drugs, or whatever. What have you contributed back to this great earth that has given you life? What have you contributed back? That's the question to ask yourself, you know. If you're an artist, what are you going to contribute back? You have to, you know. And if you contribute something back that is meaningful to human society, the gods or goddesses or angels will come to help you. You ever want something when you were a kid? You thought about it every day, right? All day long. I want a bike. I want a bike. Mama, I want a bike. Daddy, I want a bike. I want a bike. I want a bike. It was on your mind all the time. You were making a place for that to come into existence. It's still the same thing. You can do the same thing now. Just picture in your head what it is you want, and you think about it long enough, it'll appear. You have to work for it, of course, but it will be there because you're asking for it. It's in the Bible. And it's not no heavy thing, you know. Ask and it shall be given unto you, whether you're Christian or Muslim or whatever you are, you know. Those are magic words, you know. You ask and it shall be given unto you. Why? Because you are a human being. You have a vibration that goes out and comes back. You're creating all the time. But you're just not aware that you're creating. You're just doing stuff because everybody else does it. Get in line, okay. Get out of the line. You know, find out what it is that makes your heart move and beat and feel. And once you connect with that, you'll be on going. You'll be all right. The world will be okay.
When you reflect back on your life and the relationships you've had, what can you say to everybody today? What would you say? What do you want to say to all of the up and coming artists, regardless of the medium that they're involved in?
Love. You know, if you love yourself, you'll love others. But first of all, you have to learn to love yourself. A lot of people don't love themselves. You know, but you have to love yourself. Give yourself a break. Don't be so hard on yourself. Life will be hard on you enough. Take it easy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.